All right, I think we got everybody. So at this time, I call the City Council Special Workshop to order for Tuesday, January 23rd, 2016. And let the record show that Mr. Kilpatrick and Mrs. Debbie Nash King are not here. The rest of the council is present. And so with that, we only got one item to discuss, DS 18-009, continuing discussion of the KISD bond infrastructure support requirements and alternative. And Mr. David Olson will get you started on this, right?
All right, Mr. Mayor. This is a continuation of a discussion we've been having for a few work sessions now. As a staff, we've been working really hard trying to gather data as quickly as we can and make sure that we're as well informed as possible to advise you as a council on this item. Just to give you a little bit of the background, and this is covered more deeply in our staff memo, but staff was notified around the November 2017 timeframe that Killeen ISD would be seeking a bond election in May of this year. With that bond election particularly, there are two elementary schools, a middle school, and a high school that are along the Chaparral Road corridor. There are other school expansion projects and other construction projects associated with the bond, but those that directly affect Killeen are the two elementaries, one middle school and a high school. Along that Chaparral Road corridor, the construction of these schools would result in a need to expand, widen, rebuild, or some combination thereof for roadways in that area. Those are Chaparral Road, East Tremere Road, Featherline Drive, and West Tremere Road. And of those two, we've looked at this, and Chaparral Road and East Tremere are inside of a 5-year window to construct. Featherline and West Tremere are both beyond that 5-year horizon. So primarily when we talk about these improvements, we will be talking about Chaparral Road and East Tremere Road. And just to note that all of these improvements are listed as high priority projects in the adopted Transportation CIP Master Plan that was adopted by City Council in August of 2015. Again, we've seen this map time and time again. This color code's what we just talked about. The two roadways you see in green are Featherline Drive and West Tremere. The two in blue are Chaparral Road and East Tremere. And with the Chaparral Road and East Tremere projects, inside of that 5-year horizon, we have a total construction cost of $30 million estimated at this time. One correction I will make based on this slide, on the east end of Chaparral, right now we denote about 7/10 of a mile as City of Harker Heights. After some coordination with the City of Harker Heights, that is actually 5/10 of a mile is still within Bell County's jurisdiction, and only 2/10 of a mile is actually in the City of Harker Heights city limits. So that is one correction from the map that you've seen to date. We feel as a staff that this is very important to make this in a two-tiered decision-making process. So we don't want to try to make the whole decision at one time. We're going to try to break it down into two steps that we'll walk through and help you make this process accordingly. What we're calling our action alternatives. These are alternatives for the path of action, the course of action that we are recommending that you take for this project. We have 3 variations, which results in 2 options, one with a split on it. The first alternative is that the city can take the stance that this is primarily a county road, and we have the option to take a step back and let the county take the lead. The county has indicated that their path would be to rebuild this as a 2-lane county road at that time with Chaparral. East Tremere, of course, and all of these will still be a City of Killeen roadway. It is a City of Killeen roadway today, and we can't ignore the potential for the expense there. East Tremere on all is designated as $7 million. Under the option where the city would take a step back and we would look to share the cost for any portion that we have, which is just under 1/10 of a mile, we could expect our cost for Chaparral Road at that time to be around $200,000. When we look at alternative two, this is broken down into a 2A and a 2B, because alternative two, what we're looking at is the ultimate build-out of both East Tremere and Chaparral roads. When we say ultimate build-out, I mean a 5-lane arterial roadway that's 2 lanes each direction and a continuous center turn lane. The difference between option 2A and option 2B is that in option 2A, if the city were to move forward quickly and take the burden of this project on our shoulders, then we potentially could be on the hook for up to the full cost of Chaparral Road. And when we look at option 2B, our potential is there to seek partnerships with what we're calling funding partners. That would be City of Harker Heights, Bell County. We have Bell County MUD number 2, and Killeen Temple Metropolitan Planning Organization, among others, that we would consider for funding partnerships. So as we look at just the action to take, when we look at those 3 choices, what city staff is recommending is that the city council advise us to move forward with action alternative 2B. And in this case, we would move forward for the ultimate build-out of both projects, and we would seek adequate partnerships and necessary partnerships for the funding and Chaparral Road construction. This option shares the cost where it's appropriate, and it does accomplish that ultimate goal of having a 5-lane arterial roadway that would provide a safe route for those in the area. So with that, I think we need to probably take a pause there initially and discuss if there are any questions about the action alternatives that are laid out before you.
Any questions for Mr. Olson? Everybody's okay with that? Mr. Harris?
I just had some questions in general. I'm sorry. I just had some questions in general. Let me get back to it here. To it real quickly. I know when we were talking about the monies being shared, are those monies going to be guaranteed, or is it going to be guaranteed from each individual entity, or is it just? Because I know I was reading in here, it said we would get this, but in the staff report it said I think it said if we get it or something like that. So one was kind of saying it might happen, and one was saying that it would. This is what we would get, as I read it.
Correct, and part of what we're doing here, we're starting to segue into our second decision that needs to be made. With that second decision, we'll talk about the timing on these things, because as it stands today, we do not have any funding agreements in place outside of what was approved with Bell County MUD number 2. And in that instance, there was approximately $4.2 million over the course of many years that would be dedicated towards the Chaparral Road project.
So, I'm pretty sure we'll probably get some money for some people, but if we didn't, how much would that end up costing if we didn't? I'm just curious on that part.
Well, as the previous slide here indicates, the Chaparral Road project is estimated at this time, and keep in mind that that's part of what we'll discuss in our timing options in the next few slides. But from an action standpoint at this time, Chaparral Road is estimated at $23 million, and that includes engineering, right-of-way, and construction.
Okay, thank you, sir.
And are you talking about how much we get in our negotiations? Because
Yes.
I know he mentioned about
Yes.
negotiation, and I
Yes.
think that's part of the process, is just meeting with the county and the school and stuff. So, I mean, I think it's something that we definitely want to discuss and see how much, they can participate.
Because the way I was hearing it before, it made it seem like, this is what we had.
Yeah,
And so I just wanted to be clear on that
we
part.
got anything till we start that negotiation process, so.
Yeah, I got you.
Mrs. Fleming?
Well, I just wanted to kind of move backwards a little bit and say, if we have not met with the City of Harker Heights and K-Tempo and all those other people that's going to partnership with us, should we kind of wait till we negotiate with them and find out exactly how much they are willing to give us before we even, I know we're talking about alternatives and things like that, but
Yes,
I
yes,
know
ma'am.
Mr. Olson
And
is
I think that's the next
And
part
that-
that Mr. Olson's going to talk to us about. So are you ready for that?
Well, I want to just respond quickly to Ms. Fleming's comment, and that is that what you're suggesting is alternative 2B, that we before we move ahead, that we take the time necessary to actually negotiate firm agreements
Yes.
between the partners.
Yes.
Right now, we have verbal indications that everybody's willing to play, but we don't know how much, and we don't have it firmly committed in writing. So we do feel, that's one of the reasons we're recommending 2B, is because we feel like we need to take the time and make the effort to solidify these into formal agreements.
Right, that's what I was puzzled about, you know.
Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Mr. Okry.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Ms. Olson, with these formal agreements that have not been made yet, I think what we would need is also a research, or somebody's going to come and look at the scope of the work that's to be performed. So when would that work begin?
What we're recommending, and what we will recommend, is that we start some of the preliminary engineering on the front end to start getting scope and a little better costs than we currently have. I don't think we ought to go too far until we get those agreements in place. And frankly, we need to know how much and when K-Tempo may give us federal highway money for this. I mean, that is a key piece. There's a potential there that we could get as much as 80% of the project through K-Tempo. And, they have a fairly well-defined decision-making process that we would have to get inside of and work with them on. So,
Even at the K-Tempo level, if we have partners working with us in the prioritization, those partners might say, hey, it's going to benefit us all.
I think that's exactly right. I think if we go in as a group, and ourselves and Bell County and Harker Heights and the school district and everybody who has an interest in this project goes in together and said this is a regional project, it's important to all of us, I think that has to carry a lot more weight with K-Tempo than just one entity going in.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Okry, and you're correct, because a lot of the membership in K-Tempo is Harker Heights and Bell County and stuff, so that's an opportunity where we can create those partnerships, so. I saw
Well, he answered my
Mr. Rivera.
question. He answered my question. My question is going to be is, are we going to, excuse me, are we going to wait till we go and do the negotiation before we go to K-Tempo? You already answered that question for me.
We'll work them in tandem.
Right, it'd be better off that way.
Correct. And we've started covering this second set of alternatives that we have here. Once you decide the type of project you would like to pursue, the next step is to decide when that happens and how it happens. So there's three basic options when it comes to considering the timing for these projects. One is that we could act now. We could push this to a bond election in May with a number of unknowns ahead of us, and just move for the sake of moving. Second option that we have here is that we could defer action completely and take a stance that says we're not going to take any action until we see the results of KISD's bond election in May. And the third is a hybrid of the first two. That's what we were calling a strategically defer option. In this case, we would not pursue a bond election at this time. However, we would begin preliminary engineering studies and project design to an extent that we can solidify those unknowns that we don't have here. We would continue to pursue negotiations with our potential partners and formalize those negotiations in interlocal agreements or other types of agreements. And then we would continue to pursue alternative funding sources such as K-Tempo or other grant opportunities during that interim period. And that would have us much more prepared come late summer time frame to have a bit of information that we can solidify the project cost, what this really means for Killeen, what it means for Bell County, what it means for Harker Heights, and all of those involved. Because frankly, right now, we just have a lot of unknowns surrounding these two projects.
Go ahead, a question.
And with that, city staff is recommending that we take timing option number 3, and we strategically defer this action. One thing we didn't particularly talk about is moving forward with a bond election at this time would push us out of compliance with our recently adopted financial governance policies, because we would be looking to issue debt, and it would up the debt ratio that we have at this time. So by deferring this action, we can remain in compliance with those financial governance policies, and at the same time, we can keep the projects moving forward, because we're doing these adequate studies that are going to be necessary regardless of bond election, no bond election. We do have funding available in our adopted CIP governmental fund budget. And then at a future date, City Council would need to make a decision about the final funding source for these projects for the remaining pieces, but we should at that time have adequate information to make that decision.
Mr. Harris, you got a question?
Yes, sir. I was going to ask, as far as the engineering and design studies, do we already have that money budgeted? Is that already in our budget to do that?
We have money available in our budget to do what we call preliminary engineering studies. So this would help us identify the final alignment. It would help us identify right-of-way parcels that need to be acquired, and we could potentially start acquiring some of the right-of-way as well.
Thank you, sir.
And we're talking about, just on that, we're talking about starting out after May 5th, right? So we would know for sure whether this bond is, so we don't want to do any engineering until after May 5th.
Well, we could do some of the very preliminary engineering, because we will use that information at some point. But we wouldn't go too far, and we certainly would not be acquiring any right-of-way until we know the outcome of the school bond.
So when we further detail this process, what we look at, the plan of action that we've laid out is, first and foremost, we would not move forward with a bond election in May. We would look to use our existing funding and partner that with funding available from Bell County, from Harker Heights, from those that are at the table for this conversation to perform necessary preliminary engineering. Basically, that's a glorified concept plan. It gets us an idea of where we're going. We perform those studies analysis to gain a better understanding and have fewer unknowns for the project scope and the project cost. When I say begin right-of-way acquisition process, that's really more of a process where you start to go out and you need to talk to landowners, because a right-of-way acquisition process can take a significant amount of time. So you talk to the landowners, you find out where they stand on the project, how they feel about it, and with any project, you typically get some folks that say, yeah, we're willing to help, let's do what we can. You get some folks that maybe are on the fence about it, and then you're going to have some folks that are going to be a little bit polarized, and they may be adamantly against the project. So it takes time to work those things out, and that's what we refer to when we say begin right-of-way acquisition process. Next step would be to explore the funding opportunities with K-Tempo in the 2018 MTP prioritization process. That typically takes place around the August timeframe. And we do have a significant number of votes that are associated with this project between Killeen, Harker Heights, and Bell County that would likely push for funding for this project. Again, identify and solidify partnership agreements, and we have in here a line item that we would look to explore alternative partnerships, and this could come in the form of talking with the school district about what their reasonable participation in this project may be. It could come in the form of talking with the Economic Development Corporation. The Small Business Administration has been known to have some grants available. Those are kind of more long shot type grants, so that's not something we put all of our eggs in that basket, but we definitely want to explore those avenues. And then the final piece here would be that we would finalize and present a funding package back to City Council so you can make an educated and informed decision at that time as to how to fund these projects that need to be done. So that's all I've got, and I would be happy to entertain questions.
So Mr. Rivera's hand go up first. Mr. Rivera?
I was just thinking, I can't recall the day when KISD is about to build those schools. If the bond pass, I think it's 4 or 5 years from now.
If the bond were to pass, their projected date for the high school construction was 2022. I believe.
2022. And because we need to do this because on time, because I know K Temple, they already done the budget, what, 3 to 5 years now?
They work on 3-year cycles,
Yeah,
so
it's a
right now
3-year cycle.
we're dedicated through 2020 with funding for a project. And another piece there to keep in mind is that the design process for a project like this is not going to be a short process.
It takes about a year or so, a year and a half. Yeah, because I was just thinking, because if we don't really start moving in K Temple and apply immediately right after May, we probably don't get anything for K Temple. K Temple is 3 years, goes quick, and they will fill those slots right away, with, the money allocation. So that I'm concerned.
Mr. Johnson? Yeah.
I think it's a great call by city staff. I'm in support of option 2B and timing 03. I've always thought that we were moving too fast. I felt like that the city didn't have a plan, that we were being drugged into this. I think a blind person knows that the city is growing down south, but we have to be strategic about it. And this gives me an option to vote yes, because I was going to vote no on moving forward with a city bond on Mayfield. So, thank you.
Right. Mrs. Fleming?
I would just like to echo what Mr. Johnson said. I was going to also say the very same thing he was saying. So we was reading each other's minds, and I want to thank you, Mr. Olson, too, for making sure that this thing is not going on the May ballot election. And I'm also, in favor of all this as well. Thank you so much. I think it's a great thing. It's an opportunity for us to partnership with other entities around the city of Killeen. Thank you so much.
All right. Mr. Okry?
Yes, and I thank you, Mr. Olson and Mr. Olson and Olson, for presenting this 2B option. I'm thinking about Shakespeare now, to be or not to be. But that's a thing in the context that we have it now. It's better context, and I still firmly believe that we have to provide free, accessible public education, and that's going to happen. And if the bond, if it was going to happen that way, we didn't know, but I think it was great that we had those conversations to find out, because these schools are overcrowded, and we will do something about that, whether we like it or not. So I'm glad to see that we now have some context to what it is we have to do. Thank you.
All right. Mr. Harris?
I was going to say, I forgot who I said, I don't know if I was telling you, but as far as how you presented us with the options, the same thing, Echo, I'm glad we had these options, it's just saying yes or no. And let's see, one more question I did have about money and so forth. You said that the only money that you knew we were getting was from the MUD agreement. How much are we guaranteed to get from that?
The MUD agreement has $4.2 million that's going to be dedicated towards Chaparral Road. The payment plan for it, though, is structured such that it's a per unit that has a water tap fee. So we would not see the initial reimbursement until we hit the 1,000th dwelling unit.
So there's that calculation involved in there a little bit.
Right, right. There's a calculation, but at the end of the day, it's $4.2 million over a period.
Does that have a time limit? 'Cause I don't know how. I'm just asking that because.
Once it starts, it has a 10-year time limit.
Okay, so theoretically, it'll have 1,000 houses in 10 years. You think? Okay, all righty.
All right. Anybody else? Mr. Rivera?
Mr. Mayor, we got to understand one thing. This school is coming up. If that bond gets through, and I believe 90% is going to go through, especially those parents. They're definitely going to vote for it because they need that school. And we have no say-so if the school going up or not. It's not up to us, but it's up to us to make sure we get ready and make sure that we understand what's coming. It's just like a hurricane. You know it's coming, but you elect it to take safe, and you and your family and everybody else suffer. And this was going to suffer. It's going to be their family if we not get ready. Because I don't care if they go through dirt road, those schools gonna go up. And we better get ready. And I do believe that, I wish the whole city council was here. I still think we should not take a vote tonight. Oh, I mean, not a vote, but a consensus.
Well, I think we're going to get a consensus, and I think they're pretty much in probably,
Well, I hope everybody understands that this school is coming up, like it or not.
but that's what I was going to ask next, is just kind of get a consensus. I think we're all in agreement to postpone this
Yeah,
and to
definitely.
go, what was it, option two?
To be.
To be.
To be.
To be
and
until
timing
everything gets
options.
So that kind of gives the city manager direction of what we need to do.
Definitely bring
So
back a plan.
I think that's a smart move because, one of the things, and I think you mentioned it, even if the bond passes when it does, it's going to take at least, 4 years before
5
that
years.
high school. Then it takes about probably another 6 to 12 months to build. So we got plenty of time to plan it out properly, like Mr. Johnson said, so.
And not only for us, but also for the new city council coming
Yep.
up. Because most of you and most of us will not be here. We make sure the new city council come on board, they understand what they got in their hand.
And then the other part is, I know that we've gone through the priority items, so it gives the city manager and the staff that opportunity to kind of stay focused on what the city council wants, and I know we've talked about that several times, but it doesn't throw that curveball in on them, and so they can stay with the direction. So, Mr. Olson?
I wanted to reemphasize something that some of you have already said, and that is, one of the main points I wanted to make in this whole discussion was that while it is a school bond, and people are going to vote whether to build these schools and remodel the schools or not, if they approve that, it's going to have an impact on the city. We are going to have to follow up with our responsibility to make sure that we have road and sidewalk support and infrastructure to support those decisions. So I think in the past, there have been times when the schools have constructed a school, and then it was after the fact, people came out and said, well, we need a road to get to the school, or we need sidewalks to get the kids to walk. And I just think it's important that everybody understand right up front that approving the school means also we're going to have to approve the city-type infrastructure to support it. And I think that point has been made pretty well. So I appreciate the discussion.
Okay. So anything else? Any further questions or comments? Because that was our only item, so with that,
Move to adjourn.
motion by Mr. Rivera to adjourn, second by Mr. Johnson. All those in favor, just say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you.